This is slide 3 of our westward expansion unit, the Fading Frontier. Okay. As we rounded up more and more of the Indians, and then the U.S. government came into possession of more and more of the land, we have to get that land into the hands of the settlers. Right? And one way that is done is through what is called the land rushes. Right? The government will basically do anything to convince people to head west, to move out west. And one of the things they're going to do is give away land, okay, for free. Right? If you were a family, you could claim 160 acres of land, right? Just yours for the taking. Okay. Now one of the ways that we did, there were several different ways. One of the ways that this is accomplished is through what's called the land rushes. And these are most often associated with Oklahoma. That's where most of them took place. The government will send out surveyors, and they will mark off all this new land that we've gotten from the Native Americans, and they will mark it off into 160-acre plots of land. And in the middle of each plot of land, they would put a stake in the ground, a wooden stake in the ground with a little flag attached to it with a number on it. So it may have, 132 or 987, whatever. But it would have a number on it in the middle of that 160 acres. Now, the largest of these land rushes took place in April of 1889. April 1889. 500,000 boomers, they were called. 500,000 people showed up to claim land. And this picture down here at the bottom there, this is a picture of one of these land rushes. Right? Now, let me explain kind of how this works. All right. The land rush would take place on a particular day. The government would publicize well in advance, land rush is happening on this day at this location. If you were interested in claiming land, you would line up at the border of all this unclaimed land here. You would line up at the border, and the military ran these. And at a specific time, say noon, right, the military, they would fire cannon all up and down the border to signify it was time to go, and everybody takes off, and it's a race, first come, first served. Right? Now, of course, some land is better than others. Okay? What do you think would make land better than other land? Think about it. What do you have to have nearby, preferably right in the middle of your land? Right, water. You got to have water. You have to have a source of water. So if there's a river running nearby, okay, or a big lake nearby, or whatever, that land is going to be more valuable than land nowhere near water. So some land was more coveted than others. And at noon, the cannons fire and everybody takes off. Now, you would make your own little flag, okay? Because as soon as you got to the land you wanted to claim, you would take the stake out of the ground, the flag with the number on it, and you would put your little flag in the ground to show that that land had been claimed. Right? And then the next day, or whatever, you would take your flag with your number in it to the local land surveyor's office. You'd pay a $5 whatever, a little small filing fee. And if you had the flag with number 529 on it, you claimed lot number 529. You pay your $5 and you get the land. Right? Now, if you're thinking, well, that could be a little dangerous. Yes, it could. All right, these land rushes often got very dangerous. People fighting over land, racing each other to get to the land. But it's how the government decided they were going to get it out. And within 1 hour, a couple hours, all the land that the government had to hand out for that particular area would be gone. Every bit of it claimed. Right? So while a bit like organized chaos, it worked. It got land into settlers' hands. One way to convince settlers to head west and start all over was to give them free land. And the government was willing to do that if it meant people would come and settle the West. Now, I will show you in class a scene from a movie called Far and Away that illustrates what one of these land rushes might have been like. Okay, so we'll watch one of those in class, but that's kind of how they worked. Now, one thing I do need to tell you about here in terms of the land rushes, there were some people who cheated the system. Right? You weren't allowed to take off for the land until the cannons fired, right? There were people who would sneak out the day before, the night before, and they would stay the night there on the land, and everybody comes running or riding along here, racing along to get the land, and suddenly you pop up and you're already there, right? You went out earlier than you were supposed to claim land. So people that left earlier than they were supposed to got a nickname. No, not cheaters, even though that's what they were. They got the nickname Sooners because they left sooner than everybody else, or sooner than they were supposed to. Right? That's why, if you are a fan of the University of Oklahoma, you will recognize the name Sooners, the University of Oklahoma Sooners. So if you're a fan of the University of Oklahoma sports teams, your teams are named after cheaters. Yes, sorry to bear the bad news to you there. But Sooners were people that cheated the land rushes, left sooner than they were supposed to. Okay? All right. Now the government gives away so much land that by the time 1890 comes along, there was no longer a frontier line. You know, the frontier line is the point at which settlement has stopped. You know, we've settled land up to this point and it stops. And then we move a little further west and we've settled to that point and stops. That's the frontier line. By 1890, there is no longer a frontier line. It's done. All the land has been claimed, either by the government or it's been given away to settlers or people have bought it, whatever. But by 1890, the land is gone. It's disappeared. All that free land we had, all that unclaimed land, it's done. Right? Now, as we get to that point, if you back up a little bit here, as the government sees more and more and more of the land disappearing, being given away, the government steps in and decides, we need to do something about this. We need to set aside some land for government use, or we're going to give away all the land and not have any left. Right? The main use that the government sets aside land for is national parks. Right? And in 1872, you see the picture up in the top right-hand corner there. By 1872, the first national park, Yellowstone National Park, is established by the government. Okay? So the biggest use the government has for the land that they have set aside is for national parks. They say we've got to set aside some land for the public to use. Right? We'll get lots of other parks, obviously, after that to follow. Yosemite would be the next big one. But Yellowstone National Park, our first national park in 1872. And again, by 1890, there's no more free land. It's all been given away or bought up. Right? Now, last thing we need to talk about here is something that's called the safety valve theory. Okay? A safety valve, literally, on a machine, is something that's meant to release pressure. If pressure builds up and up and up and up, eventually something will explode. A safety valve releases pressure on something so that it doesn't explode. Right? Well, the thing that was gaining more and more and more pressure with threats of exploding were the cities in the east, the big cities in the east. Population was increasing greatly. Immigrants from Europe, in particular, were coming to the big cities of the east and settling, and the cities were becoming overcrowded. So the government needed to relieve some pressure on the cities. So they figured, hey, look, we've got all this land out west. We'll just give away land, and people will leave the cities and they'll head west to become farmers or ranchers or whatever. It doesn't quite work out that way, because what they discover is that people aren't willing to give up what they've got for an unknown future in the West. Even if you don't have much, it's better than nothing. So the problem is that if the government expects these people to go west to become farmers, they're not going to become farmers because they don't know how to farm. You can't take immigrants who are used to big city living, or you can't take Easterners who have spent their whole life living in a big city and expect them to go become a farmer. They don't know how to farm, right? So the big hope that the West, farming in the West, would become this safety valve to relieve the pressure of the overcrowding in the cities, the government's big hope there did not work. But there's a catch here. It didn't work the way they thought it would work. The West does become a safety valve. It does relieve a lot of the pressure of the overcrowding in the cities. It's just not for farmers. What becomes the safety valve? What releases all that pressure in the overcrowded cities of the East are the cities of the West. You see the picture here, right? While people living in cities in the East don't want to go be farmers, they do want to go live in cities in the West. So new cities that are popping up, like Denver or Chicago, well, starting Midwest, Chicago, heading west, Denver, way west, San Francisco, like in the picture here, the cities of the West become the safety valves because they know how to live in the city. They know how to run businesses. And these cities in the West that are just starting and are booming and expanding and exploding, they need businesses. So businessmen from the East head west, and suddenly your safety valve works.